All right, so today we're diving deep into the art of war. You know, that book, it's practically got a theme song at this point, right? Generals, CEOs, everybody and their cousin seems to have read it.
It's definitely had staying power.
But here's the thing, we're not just talking military strategy. We're talking about a historical mystery.
It's true. The authorship of The Art of War is something that, well, it's fascinated people for centuries.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher.
Yeah.
We've all heard the stories about Sun Tzu, right? This brilliant general whipping King Holu's concubines into shape just to prove a point.
Right. Those stories are pretty out there.
Yeah.
But our source, artofwar.pdf, it points out that a lot of that might be, more legend than history. For example, the Shiji, which does mention Sun Tzu, wasn't written until much later. And the Cho Chuan, which is a super detailed record from the time Sun Tzu was supposedly around, doesn't even mention him.
Wait, hold on. So the most reliable source from 5th century BC China just trusts. Forgets about this supposed military genius.
It is a bit strange. You'd think someone like that would leave a bigger mark on the historical record.
Yeah, you'd think. So are we saying Sun Tzu was never real?
Well, it's not that simple. But it does make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, history's been, how do I put this, massaged a bit. Maybe to make someone look better, or to push a certain viewpoint.
Okay, so maybe Sun Tzu isn't the all-powerful figure some people make him out to be. But what about the book itself? Can't we look at the writing, the language, to see if it even fits with the 5th century BC?
Right, we can definitely do that. And when we do, it gets interesting. The language used in The Art of War, it actually does line up with other Chinese texts from that time.
Really? Okay, so the language checks out. But every good mystery needs a twist. What about the content itself? Anything in there that throws off the timeline?
As a matter of fact, there is. Sun Tzu mentions these battles between the Wu and Yu states. Remember, he's supposed to have served the Wu state in the 5th century BC, right?
Right, that's the traditional story.
So here's the thing. Those two states didn't really become rivals until after the 5th century BC.
Hold on, wait, so the book references stuff that supposedly happened after Sun Tzu was already gone. That's a pretty big problem.
It does make you think, doesn't it? Like maybe someone was writing with the benefit of hindsight?
Yeah, it's like finding a Roman coin with, like, Abraham Lincoln's face on it.
Exactly.
So what are we saying then? Somebody just made up Sun Tzu.
Not necessarily. There are other possibilities. For example, maybe The Art of War, as we know it, was actually put together later, maybe even much later.
You're saying it might be more of a compilation.
Exactly. Like maybe someone gathered up all of these different military writings and strategic ideas that were floating around and slapped the name Sun Tzu on it. Sort of a best of compilation of military wisdom.
And those later battles between the Wu and the Yu, they could have been like the inspiration for some of it.
That's one possibility. Or maybe Sun Tzu wasn't actually one person. Maybe it was a title, like a rank or a position, passed down through generations of strategists.
Okay, now that is an interesting thought. So we're talking about a kind of lineage of Sun Tzu's, almost like a secret society of military masterminds, all working on this ultimate guide to warfare.
And wouldn't that be something? A shadowy group whispering strategic secrets from one generation to the next, refining their knowledge, perfecting their art. And at the heart of it all, this book, The Art of War.
So we're talking about a book maybe written by a committee or passed down through a dynasty of military geniuses.
It's a fun thought experiment, isn't it?
It really is. But whoever wrote this thing, they were definitely paying attention. Because there's some seriously insightful stuff in The Art of War. It's like they had a direct line to human nature.
That's a great point. I mean, take a look at how Sun Tzu describes a successful commander. It's not just about, being good at fighting.
Right. It's a whole leadership philosophy.
Exactly. In Section 9 of Chapter 1, Sun Tzu lays out these 5 essential traits: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. He's talking about inspiring people, motivating them, even earning their trust.
Yeah, he doesn't just talk the talk. He walks the walk.
Absolutely. Like in Section 26 of Chapter 11, where he talks about the ideal general being both kind and authoritative. Someone who can show indulgence, but also knows how to, put their foot down when they need to. It's about balance, right?
Yeah, it's that whole iron fist in a velvet glove kind of thing.
Exactly. And you can really see that throughout the book, this understanding of how to lead, how to motivate, how to manipulate, to be honest.
Which, let's be real, is a pretty important skill for a military leader, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that famous line, supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. That's not exactly a call to mindless violence.
Not at all. In fact, minimizing casualties is a huge theme in the art of war. Sun Tzu talks a lot about choosing your battles carefully, about using force only as a last resort.
It's more about, like, outmaneuvering your opponent, mentally and strategically, right?
Absolutely. It's like he's saying, look, war is a messy business. It's brutal. It's unpredictable. So if you can achieve your goals without a fight, that's the real victory.
Okay, so knowing when to fight and when not to fight, that's crucial. But when you do have to engage, Sun Tzu seems to be all about adaptability, right? I mean, he's got that great analogy about water.
Oh, absolutely. He says, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare, there are no constant conditions. In other words, you can't be rigid. You have to be willing to change your plans, to roll with the punches.
Be like water, my friend.
Exactly. And that's such an important lesson, even today, right? I mean, think about how quickly things change in the world, how unpredictable everything is. You have to be adaptable just to survive.
Totally. So we've got strategy, we've got adaptability, but we can't forget about intel. Sun Tzu was big on spying, wasn't he?
Oh, huge. He even dedicates a whole chapter to it.
What's the deal with that? Why so much emphasis on spies?
Well, for Sun Tzu, it all boils down to this idea of foreknowledge. Knowing your enemy's plans, their strengths, their weaknesses, even their state of mind. He calls this kind of knowledge divine.
Divine knowledge. So like mystical powers, reading tea leaves, that kind of thing.
Not quite. Sun Tzu was all about practicality. In section 4 of chapter 14, he actually shoots down the idea of getting intel through supernatural means. He says straight up, it cannot be elicited from spirits, it cannot be obtained inductively from experience, nor by any deductive calculation. Knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be obtained from other men.
Okay, so no magic crystal ball. Got it.
Nope. For Sun Tzu, human intelligence was the most valuable kind. But he also knew that managing spies, it's its own art form. He actually outlines 5 different types of spies.
5? Wow. Okay, what are they? Give me the rundown.
You've got your local spies, people from the enemy's territory. Then there are inward spies. These are officials you've managed to turn to your side. Converted spies are enemy spies you've captured and, well, convinced to work for you instead.
That's sneaky.
It is. Then you have doomed spies. These are folks you send out with false information to mislead the enemy. And finally, surviving spies. These are the ones who come back with intel.
Wow, that's quite the system. So are you saying that to be a good leader, you basically have to be a master manipulator of people?
That's a bit harsh, but Sun Tzu definitely understood the power of psychology.
Right. And how to use it to your advantage.
Exactly. But it's not just about manipulation. Sun Tzu actually stresses the importance of treating your spies well.
Really? That's not what I would have expected. Why is that?
Well, think about it. These guys are putting their lives on the line for you. You have to offer them something in return.
Loyalty, trust, respect. All that good stuff.
Precisely. Sun Tzu believed that if you want your spies to be loyal, you have to treat them with benevolence and straightforwardness. Basically, you have to be a good leader, even to the people who are working in the shadows. It shows a real understanding of human nature.
And if we circle back to our authorship mystery, it makes you wonder, right? If whoever wrote this was so good at deception, could they have used those same skills to create this whole elaborate Sun Tzu persona?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, if all warfare is based on deception, as Sun Tzu writes, who's to say that doesn't apply to crafting your own legacy?
Whoa. It's like a historical hall of mirrors. We're trying to figure out who wrote The Art of War, but the book itself could be the biggest deception of all.
Mind-blowing, isn't it?
So it's like The Art of War itself might be the ultimate act of deception. But deception aside, there's some pretty solid wisdom in those pages. And I'm struck by how much of it isn't about just brute force.
Absolutely. One of the most enduring principles from the art of war is that emphasis on preparation. Like Sun Tzu says, know your enemy, know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. It's about stacking the deck in your favor before things even get started.
Right, so it's not just about winning the fight, it's about setting yourself up to win before the fight even begins.
Exactly. That takes strategy and it takes knowledge. Knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, but also really understanding your opponent. Sun Tzu would say, don't even think about going into battle blind.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Which takes us right back to all that spy stuff, right? I mean, that's what all that intel gathering is about.
It all connects, doesn't it? Sun Tzu wanted leaders to be prepared, to see the whole picture, to know what's coming before it hits.
So you're saying it's about having a plan, but also being able to, like, think on your feet. Because no plan survives contact with the enemy perfectly, right?
Exactly. You've got to be able to adapt. Things change, the unexpected happens, and you have to be ready to adjust your strategy. Sun Tzu understood that.
Okay, so adaptability, that's key. But we're talking about a book that's, what, over 2,000 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Written at a time when war meant chariots and swords and, I don't know, fighting elephants.
Mm.
How does any of that apply to how we do things today? I mean, we've got drones, cyber warfare. It's a whole different world.
Right? It's a whole different world, but that's what's so amazing about the art of war. Those core principles, they still hold up. In fact, you could argue they're even more important today with all the complexity and interconnectedness we're dealing with.
So what you're saying is Sun Tzu could teach us a thing or two about navigating not just like literal wars, but also, I don't know, office politics or that negotiation with your landlord.
Think about it. We face challenges every single day. It could be a global pandemic. It could be the economy going haywire. It could be trying to keep up with the latest technology. To deal with all that, you need to think strategically. You need to adapt, and you need to understand how people behave, how they think.
So the art of war is like a guidebook for making sense of chaos.
That's a great way to put it. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is how much Sun Tzu emphasizes the psychological side of conflict. He knew that victory wasn't just about physical strength. It was about breaking your opponent's will to fight, making them doubt themselves, throwing their plans into disarray.
Right, like that saying, the greatest victory is the one won without a single shot being fired.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu provides a roadmap for achieving that. Using deception, creating diversions, exploiting weaknesses, and really understanding the importance of keeping your own side motivated while undermining your opponent's morale.
So it's not enough to understand the battlefield, you have to understand the minds of the people on it.
Absolutely. It goes back to that deep understanding of human nature that we see throughout the art of war. And that, I think, is what makes it so incredibly fascinating, even today. We may never know for sure who wrote it, but whoever it was, they left behind a powerful and enduring legacy. One that continues to resonate with readers centuries later.
A true testament to the timelessness of human nature. And maybe, just maybe, the art of deception. Well, folks, that about wraps up our deep dive into the art of war. Hopefully, you're walking away with some new insights, some food for thought, and maybe a little bit of strategic wisdom to apply to your own battles, whatever those may be.
A little bit of strategy never hurts.
Never hurts at all. So, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, be like water, my friends.